Hello, everyone, and welcome into this week's discussion of entrepreneurial journalism. And I'm going to call it EJ for short because I'll say it so many times during this presentation that I'll probably fumble my words. That's a lot of letters. Entrepreneurial journalism. We're discussing it as part of our multimedia journalism class because it so closely relates to what we're doing in here and what we've been doing in here throughout the entire semester. So, this is really about the future and sort of the next generation of the news business. And it's very important for you now that you've developed some multimedia skills to understand sort of where you could put those skills to work. And that could even be in a venture that you create on your own. So let's see what's on the big show for today. We're going to define this term, entrepreneurial journalism. We're going to talk about why it matters, look at some examples, and then ultimately, by the end of this, figure out what it means for you, what it means to you, in thinking about EJ. So once we do that, we'll take a look ahead, and then we'll put a bow on our Week 13 discussion here of entrepreneurial journalism. I'm not going to go back and start the recording over. You're just going to have to bear with me and bear with my clumsy tongue here trying to say this. EJ, that's what we're sticking with, EJ. So let's talk about what is EJ. Entrepreneurial journalism, there we go, is the fusion of journalism and entrepreneurship, where journalists not only produce content, but also create sustainable, innovative media ventures. So it's about both the content side and the business side. It's about creating a something that is a little bit different than our traditional sources. And when we say traditional sources, if you've taken my Journalism 200 class, you know that we've reviewed those traditional journalism sources repeatedly, newspapers, radio, television news, even to an extent. This is sort of taking a new look at journalism, how we not only make content, but how we get that content to our audience. So some of the really key features of EJ are focusing very specifically on audience needs. These kind of new outlets are not trying to win over the hearts of millions of people. They're not trying to be the next New York Times or CNN or whatever it may be. They're trying to be something new and different and focus on a specific audience. More on that in a few moments. The innovation here, it's something unique. It's something perhaps we haven't seen much of before in the storytelling and delivery of the news. And then the business models are also something that stand out here. How do they make their money? How do they stay afloat? How do they not only stay afloat, but how do they stay profitable? How does advertising, if at all, play into the business model? So it's looking at the news business from a totally new perspective. Those traditional news sources, what we call our legacy sources, that are a lot of newspapers, television stations, they're likely to be around. They're likely to stay. They're still adapting to the digital world. Some of them are hanging on still for dear life. Some of them are very strong, like the New York Times, for example, and they'll continue, to kind of be around. But we're talking about new outlets. We're talking about innovation, change. Why does it matter? Well, as I mentioned, traditional media outlets where we've been used to getting our news, they're shrinking, they're changing, they're closing. That model that they relied on for so many years, where they were kind of the exclusive home of, content such as like advertising, that's been replaced by social media or other digital entities. Um, that model just isn't working as well as it used to. So when that happens, when there is disruption in an industry, that disruption creates opportunity, and EJ can swoop in and sort of take advantage of that opportunity. Speaking of opportunity, the opportunity is more than just the business sense. It's also about you as a journalist taking control of your career and, you know, creating a startup journalism outlet, a startup news outlet. You don't need as much as you used to start it up. You need a web presence, you need social media, and that takes some time to build. And I'm not saying it's easy, but you don't need to have a printing press. You don't need to have a television signal to do journalism independently on your own. So that's something that's very different. So this is definitely I think, a career opportunity for many people. Um, Thinking about monetizing, changing the way that news outlets receive revenue. Obviously advertising is the most common way, but introducing new subscription models. Working with advertising in a little bit different way, maybe thinking about news being sponsored, which isn't really anything new, but innovating with that a little bit. And even crowdfunding, having crowdfunded public supported media, which again has been around for a while, but doing it in new ways, different ways, and applying it here to this industry. So, entrepreneurs, how do they think? What's the mindset here when it comes to journalism? Well, number one, entrepreneurs see problems, and when they see problems, they try to think about solutions to those problems, and those solutions typically are where their opportunities come from. Problems in the media industry right now, a lack of trust, um, lack of engagement, people turning away from the news rather towards it. What can be done in those pain points? How can they be solved using innovation? All right. This also takes some risk. It's a willingness to experiment, not only with storytelling but also revenue streams. Um, you know, Making a leap into EJ is not everyone's cup of tea. It's not something everyone can do. Um, but it does have its advantages. Obviously, if you can be successful in taking that risk. Some business savvy is probably required as well if you want to, like I said, take this leap and maybe start your own outlet, your own business. That's important to think about. How do you generate income? How do you, if you are successful, how do you scale? What about your budget? What about, the costs that you have associated with your product that you're creating? All of those are things you need to think about, and the entrepreneurial mindset helps with that. So EJ has become very impactful in our world. I'm going to show you some examples of EJ outlets here in a few moments, but some things that it's doing that we see already and that we're hoping will continue. Number one, it's really giving um, typically maybe unseen, unheard groups more voice. Um, some of the some of the newer outlets are focused on, for example, communities of color, maybe in particular urban areas. Certain demographics like in the LGBTQ community. They're very focused on highlighting those communities and publishing their stories. And that's something that, in the long history of journalism, those are communities, those I mentioned and others, that have been overlooked. And now this is empowering them by giving them their own news outlet. And I think it's a really cool development in journalism. Um, it also has to do with issues, not just people, but also issues, underreported issues, a focus on stories maybe that are very niche to a particular area, a particular interest. It's calling attention to those. And then when we do more journalism, we're doing more for democracy. We're providing more perspectives. We're providing the people more information to make the decisions and choices that they do day in and day out. We're shining more light on those in power, whether that be government or corporations. We're creating more public understanding of how the world works. And that all in total makes, again, those in power more accountable. So it's more journalism. And I think that is always a good thing. So some examples of EJ that I've just kind of selected at random, and there's many more out there. One of them is known as the Hustle. This is a daily newsletter. E-newsletters are really hot in the EJ world and just the journalism world right now. Even legacy journalism is doing a lot of email newsletters. So when I say newsletter, I'm talking about an email newsletter. The Hustle is very specialized in e-newsletter. Most of their content centers around the business and tech industries. And this was created by entrepreneurs, just like we're talking about today, who said they saw kind of a niche out there that wasn't being addressed, and they took advantage of it. So check out The Hustle when you get an opportunity. It's a great source. Another really powerful news outlet that's been around for some time and kind of led the charge when we're thinking about entrepreneurial journalism is ProPublica. And ProPublica is actually a nonprofit. And that's sort of what makes it fit really well into this EJ category because they've created a really innovative revenue model that relies on donors, sort of like a public television station. And they do very deep dive, very deep investigations into issues related to public interest, government, so on and so forth. And they get grants to do their work. They also collaborate with more legacy media like the New York Times and the Chicago Tribune. They've done work with ProPublica. So it's a really interesting business model, an interesting content model, and a really interesting operations model for ProPublica. Definitely check them out. And then another example is The Independent. This is a UK-based um, news outlet, digital only, and it really focuses a lot on global issues. So just because it's UK based doesn't mean it doesn't have value for us here in the States or anywhere around the world. They focus on international issues and try to provide some different perspectives, what they call alternative narratives to these global issues. So if you're interested in international news, this is an example of an EJ that's really doing some good work in that regard. Something I want to mention here and really tie together to our class is that the strengths of all of these entrepreneurial journalism outlets, these new outlets that are innovating and interacting with their audience, so on and so forth, they are all the things that we've been covering here in multimedia journalism. So the digital storytelling, video, audio, text, interactive elements, digital storytelling, multimedia journalism are all really high priorities for these outlets. They also leverage social media really well. They're very strong presence on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, so on and so forth, all in an effort to build their audience and generate revenue. And then they also use data journalism. I mentioned ProPublica. They're really a strong data journalism outfit, using data to tell stories. I want to take a moment to um, give a little shameless plug to Journalism 206. That's storytelling with data and social media. That's a class I'll be teaching in the spring. And 206 is an opportunity for you to learn even more and add on to your skill set that you built here in this class. So I would highly recommend that if you're interested. That is an asynchronous class, and it builds on what we've been discussing here in 205. You can do this. You can start your own journalism venture. It takes a lot of work. It takes some luck. It takes some risk. It takes creativity and innovation, but you can do it. Start out by identifying a niche. Focus on maybe it's a topic. Think about topics you're passionate about. Think about maybe a certain community, and that's any group of people. It can be related to a particular demographic. It could be related to a geographic community or just a general need for information out there. What do we need? What are we missing? So many people like to talk about what journalism is doing wrong and what it's missing. Fix it. Start a venture, or propose one at least, right? Um, it's all about content in the end. Creating valuable content, creating content that your audience feels that it needs, that it desires, mixing the audio, the video, the photo, the text, all very desirable to your audience. And that is in order to build engagement, build followers, and what that ultimately turns into is revenue, right? Um, and once you build that audience, continue using social media, search engine optimization, that's SEO. Email newsletters are an excellent way to grow your reach. Um, that's something you can do. And then look for crowdfunding, look for grants. Um, start out, maybe you can get some small advertisements to start. Maybe people will come in and sponsor content. This article is brought to you by, Coors Light. I don't know. I was just thinking about beer. Um, you could do a subscription model. But as I look at this list, I think to myself, nothing on here says you have to buy a printing press. Nothing on here says you have to get a television signal. You can get started relatively cheaply creating content and pushing the content out there. You have to be patient. Maybe that's the hardest part, but you can arrive to a point where you start to build an audience and people start to turn to you for your content. An excellent case study of an upstart entrepreneurial journalism outlet is The Skim. You may have heard of The Skim. The Skim has been around for quite some time now. I would say going on, off the top of my head, probably going on 15 years, if not longer. And it was really one of the first daily email newsletters um, that reached a lot of people's boxes. And it originally began as a sort of a with a niche target for women. Um, highlighting not only, the substantive news of the day, but also, style, so on and so forth. And it was in these sort of brief, very chewable, digestible nuggets of news um, that people really took to, and they were delivered directly to the inbox. And then eventually, once this text-based content kind of took off, they took more of a multimedia focus, excuse me, making videos, podcasts, so on and so forth. Um, they use native advertising, which is a really interesting concept. Read up more about that. They have paid partnerships, and they even sell merchandise that has been pretty popular. So again, an interesting monetization um, model. So when you target a niche market and you do it right and you deliver good content, and then you create a monetization that is also beneficial to your reader, your consumer, it can be really successful. And the Skim is an example of that. If you're interested, I'd recommend checking them out. Some more innovation in journalism that's happening here in this EJ era. Crowdsourced journalism. I'm going to mention WikiLeaks. I know it's a really controversial source that's been around for some time. Julian Assange, not the model citizen here, but it was really one of the first sort of innovative, out of the box news sources, and people argued whether or not it was journalism. Some people still say no. I won't have that debate now, but it does represent an example of innovation where they let readers submit content, documents, even so on and so forth, and they publish them. Hyper local news, I think, is a really, really important area because we need to know the news that's happening in our community. In our community here in San Luis Obispo, there's actually a really popular Facebook page. It's called Slow County News, and they do pretty good work. I've actually gotten to know one of the journalists there at Slow County News, and they have very low overhead. They don't even have a website. They operate strictly on Facebook. They write stories, and it's actually a pretty darn good news site given that it's relatively simple. And it's because they do hyper local content. And hyper local just means very close to home in your backyard. And then, of course, all these innovations lead to more opportunities for freelancers. You can write for a number of different outlets. You don't have to necessarily participate in EJ by creating your own news outlet. You can write for all of these new outlets. As there are more outlets out there, they are going to need more writers. And so there are coming opportunities for you in that regard. And you can do freelance journalism by doing the work that we've done here in multimedia journalism. Obviously, and I've talked about them a little bit here, there's challenges in EJ, right? This is not easy. There's a heck of a lot of competition. There's a lot of people out there wanting to do this, create new sources, so on and so forth. Making a profit here is difficult. Staying afloat is difficult. So, thinking about all the different streams you can create for income can you get those streams moving so they can sustain you? Can you get those streams moving so they can help you profit? That's a challenge, right? It takes a lot of time to build engagement with the audience. It takes a lot of time to develop content. Um, you're a business owner and a journalist if you're doing something like this. You have to do marketing. Um, Many times, those starting out with an EJ venture, they're a one person band, right? They're doing all the things that are associated with the business, and that could be overwhelming. But again, as I've mentioned throughout this presentation, there's plenty of opportunities for that. So if you want to get into this, some advice that I have, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form an entrepreneurial journalist, but I've been studying it for some time and monitoring the industry. I think one of the most important things is that you need to be adaptable. Be flexible, be willing. If you go in with a model or an idea, be willing to change that model or idea. It doesn't mean that it wasn't successful. It just needs to be adapted for different audiences. Um, Make sure, as I've mentioned, that you're leveraging that multimedia, that social media. Those are all tools at your disposal. So use them wisely and effectively to build your audience. Um, Engage your audience. Obviously, you want people to invest in you and your content. Make them feel like they're part of your success because they are. That's really important. And then for everyone, even if you're not planning to do some sort of entrepreneurial adventure, network, collaborate with others. If you see an EJ outlet that you really like, reach out to them and see if they need help. They very, well may need help. It doesn't mean you're going to become a millionaire overnight by doing that work, but at least you could build your portfolio. Um, See if there's opportunities out there. That would be really, really helpful, and it would get you to get you a firsthand look at how the business operates. So, just some conclusions and takeaways here. Um, Entrepreneurial journalism, it's about innovation. It's about what's next for media, what's next for the news media. We have our legacy outlets, our legacy publications. Those are going to be around. We've lost some, obviously, but this EJ is what's next. And it's all about good storytelling with innovative business strategies that can adapt to our new digital world. Um, this is the time to be an entrepreneurial journalist. It really is. There's a lot of opportunities in the market for you to pop up. You have the tools now. The tools are relatively cheap. The tools are available to you to use. They're rather easy to learn. There's a real opportunity here for you to build something and grow. I know from your time in this class, you have the skills to do this. So there's an opportunity here. And I'll just say at the end here, the future of journalism is in your hands, whether this is you consuming EJ, content, or you creating it, or even building it. It's in your hands. So think about, are you going to take this leap? Do you want to take this leap? I sound like I'm trying to sell you something. I'm trying to sell you a hope and a concept. We need to reimagine things in the news business, and entrepreneurial journalism is just that. So be mindful of it and think about it as you move forward in your career. Maybe it isn't something for you right now, but again, there's a lot of opportunity to build something unique and fresh as we move forward. As always, if you're watching and you have questions for me, jot them down, reach out. I'm happy to have that dialogue with you. And I hope you enjoyed today's lecture. Let's take a look ahead for class, what we're going to be doing in class for this week. We have another chapter in the Adornato book. This is chapter 10, Mobile and Social Media in Your Career. So it gets in a little bit about this entrepreneurial idea, but then also some other practical ideas for how this is going to shape your career. We also have the weekly quiz. The quiz is going to cover this lecture, the reading from Adornato, and a couple of questions on current events. You now have the final project on your plate. So continue to work on that. Do not save it for the last minute. That will lead you to problems. All right, get ahead of it. I have left feedback on your pitches on Canvas. Make sure you review your feedback. That's how you're going to get an idea of what I think. I'm going to offer you some tips on how to be successful with that final project, so on and so forth. So it's really important for you to take a look at that. All right. That is the show for today, gang. I appreciate you watching. I hope everyone is well. Again, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we will see you soon. Take care. Thank you.